All right, well, welcome everyone. I know people are just starting to come into the webinar that we're doing today. I'm Lisa Kirchenbauer, President and founder of Omega Wealth Management in Arlington, Virginia. Many of you already know me. I'm joined by my associate Davis Gardner, who's going to be helping me out with the webinar today. And actually, if you have any questions or need any help down in the chat box, feel free to go ahead and put any sort of comments there, and Davis will be happy to help you. So I want to go ahead and get started here today. And we've got, I know it's been sort of a rough week, and so I want to get into our presentation for today, talking about creating a plan B. Because I don't know about you, I've been struggling a bit. So let me go ahead and start the presentation, and we'll go from there. And again, Davis, don't hesitate to jump in if we have any comments or questions as we go along here. So creating a plan B, navigating your financial plan and investment strategy in turbulent times. So a couple of weeks ago, my colleague Jared Jones, our Director of Investments, did a webinar strictly on looking at politics, the election, and the markets, and I urge you to check that out, because if you were just looking for an investment review of what's happening with the markets and what to expect with the upcoming elections, please refer to that. I'm going to actually talk a little bit more about what people may be worried about, what they may be thinking about, how to work through those worries and concerns, and then what to do, what action to take, both on the financial planning and on the investment side as we move forward. Oh, let me go back, because I don't want to miss this one. You're not losing your mind. I think many of us may feel like this woman, where we just are really not sure what is going on. Every day there's some piece of news, some other craziness, whether it's politics or the economy or the markets. You're not alone. I mean, in fact, the genesis for today's webinar came out of, honestly, some conversations with our clients, with emails that we've gotten, and a little bit of how I've been feeling as well. So one of the things that I wanted to start with today, it's an exercise that we as certified financial transitionists here at Omega, and Kathy and Jared and I are all certified financial transitionists with the Financial Transitionist Institute. Sometimes we need to do a little triage to figure out what's going on. If you think about being in the emergency room, and you can see here, you're trying to figure out what to do when there's a lot going on and there's a lot of issues, which are important, which aren't, and what action should you take. So I thought this was sort of a good graphic. Hopefully you're not that black square. Maybe it's feeling a little urgent or immediate. But that's okay. That's what we want to talk about today. Now, for many of you, if you signed up in advance, Carol went ahead and sent out to you the financial triage tool that is on our website. We're going to walk through some of the pages on that today, just to set the stage before we talk about some of the planning considerations and then some of the investment considerations that you may have. So if you didn't get that email, please feel free to go ahead to our website, and you can put this URL in, or I think Davis is going to put it in the chat box. If you want to go ahead and grab it there, you can do that as well. So feel free to pick it up. And if you did get an email from us, please go ahead and open up the document at this point. I'm going to actually stop sharing for just a moment here. And I think we had one comment. Let's just see. Okay, thank you for that, Davis. And then I'm going to actually pull up the tool for a second for everybody to go through that, because I think it's really important. It's a great tool that we use in a lot of different circumstances with clients going through transition. So when we think about any sort of difficult situation, important transition, when a lot of things are coming at you at the same time, it's a good idea to take a deep breath and assess what are the issues, what are the fears and concerns. So what I urge everyone to do, if you felt like you're really just spinning a little bit with all of the things that you're worried about, take a moment, maybe right now, maybe as homework from today's webinar, to articulate, to write down all of the fears and concerns you might have. Now, we've heard everything from, there's going to be an uprising after, an unrest after the elections, or while we're going through figuring out who might have been elected. There's concern about an economic downturn, especially if we don't get any additional stimulus. The market going down. In fact, we'll talk about why the heck does why do the financial markets keep going up if the economic news maybe isn't as good as it seems. So it might be losing your job. We've got several clients who are facing and are either by choice or not by choice are going to lose their job in the next 3 to 6 months. And so we're trying to work through the planning there. There may be some concerns on the health front, perhaps with family. So I really encourage you to take the time to get them all written down. Get it all out of your head, because what we know is when that's all running around in your head, it's impacting your thinking. There's just no doubt about it. And the reason we want to do this is that we really think it's important to let you know that we don't think you're crazy. You're not alone. And let's figure out, what do we need to do or not do? So once you get all of the fears and concerns down, the next thing that we think is really important to do is to assess the level of threat. Like, is this really likely, or is it something I'm worried about, but it's pretty unlikely that this is really going to happen? And so go ahead and you're going to want to mark immediate, possible, or unlikely. And you'll find that's going to be really important when we get to the next page and to the next step of this exercise. From there, so this is important. One of the most important things that we can do when we're facing a lot of uncertainty is to try to figure out what can we control and what can't we control. And in this case, we're actually offering you 3 options. It's, can I control this? Yes, or yes, I can control this. Is it more of a manage? So I can't completely control this, but I can try to manage the impact to me. Or is it literally, I just got to monitor it, there's not much I can do, but I'm going to keep an eye on it. And that, again, is going to be important as we work through the action steps here. So it's a process to really understand, what do I need to deal with? What's a priority as we go through the worksheet? And I'm going to scroll ahead and bear with me, because I know sometimes I can be a little uncomfortable. So when we figure out, when we've prioritized everything that is an immediate concern, assuming that you can control it or manage it, you're probably going to want to put it in this first box, which is taking some action now. Or maybe it's something you need to decide on, or maybe it's something you need to research. So it might be, you're really worried about losing your job or some economic, maybe it's an income source you have coming in, and it is something that you have some control over. Okay, so this is the box to put down. What do you need to do? Maybe who do you need to reach out to? What do you need to research to help you feel like you have a little better handle on what's going on? Now, I'm going to just scroll back for a second just so we can look at this. Then you're going to have some things that are more of a, well, it's possible that something might happen. And again, I have some ability to control and manage it. That's going to move into the soon decisions and action steps. So you're not going to worry about right this moment, but we want to make sure, get it on paper, not lose track of it, but I also don't want you worrying about it, because in the end, the most important thing that you're going to come away with today is, what do I need to do now to have a little bit more peace of mind, to feel like I have some control amidst the turbulence, the uncertainty that might be ahead. And then one more time, I'm going to scroll back here. And if you find that you've got something on here that is a fear or a concern that honestly is sort of unlikely, it's probably not going to happen, but you don't want to completely let go of it. That's okay. And let's say at best you can monitor it. You can't control it, you can't manage it. Maybe there's absolutely nothing you can do, but let's say that you can at least monitor it and go, yep, there it is. And that is going to fall into the later decisions. So the goal that we find that comes out of this is the prioritizing. First, we get it all down on paper. Then we go back and we prioritize. What do I need to take action on now? Those are the most immediate items, the ones we can control and manage. Soon, these are the ones that are possibly something we need to be concerned about. And again, we can possibly control or manage them. And then there's those items that honestly we either can't do anything about. At best, they're unlikely, and maybe we can just monitor them. So I'm going to urge you maybe right now, take some time to go through, start to get some notes. The most important thing for me right now for you is to capture the now decisions, because that's where, coming out of today's webinar, you're going to want to be focused. And I encourage you, if you're one of our clients, don't hesitate to send us a copy of this, or maybe send us a quick email. Let us know what's on your mind, what are your priorities, because what we need to know is that something that impacts our work for you? Is it something we need to help you weigh in on? Are there tax planning considerations? Are there investment changes we need to make? Especially if we don't have our meeting coming up for a few weeks and you're really concerned, please don't hesitate to reach out to us with what's on your mind here. So one of the things I want to do is to also talk a little bit about the idea of happiness set points. So I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but we're all born with sort of a set point of how happy we are. And you know, your level might be closer to half empty, or it might be half full. It might be somewhere in that range. But the professor, I'm not even going to try to say her name, at UC Riverside, studies happiness. And what she found is that we're all just born, about 50% of how happy or unhappy we are, we start out with no matter what. From there, our life circumstances that have happened to us add another about 10%, so unique to every single person. And this becomes important when you think about in families. Okay, the 50% might be similar, same genes, similar genes. Life circumstances could be similar or different, depending on when you were born, what the age gap is between siblings, maybe your own adult experiences. Add that next 10%. So now we're up to 60. The remaining 40% is your intentional activity. What you do or what you don't do, that's what you can control. Not 100%, by the way, for those of you who are thinking that you can control it. So just to, look at this again, the 50% of it is just where you start from. 10% is how much resources that you have, the career you've had, maybe how happy you are, how fulfilled you are in that career. Have you been married? Have you not? We know there's plenty of studies that show, especially for men, being married raises your happiness set point. I have to say, I think for women, it's not necessarily true. And then the remaining 40% is your habitual thoughts, words, and action. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, but we've already started to make an action list. So that's really important to think about. So a little food for thought here as we go forward. So one of the things that we also know from a lot of the positive psychology happiness study that is out there, that when you're trying to navigate turbulent times, uncertain times, one of the most important practices that you can go through is the practice of appreciation or gratitude. So what we love to ask our clients to do, we do this at Omega. Actually, every week we provide headlines on what is working well. If every day you can take the time to maybe write down 3 things that have worked well for you, that you're grateful for, it's a fantastic exercise. So what's working well in general, maybe what you're grateful for right now. And to go one step further, in the future, I'm looking forward to and I'm grateful for. Maybe it's, maybe there's future family members come in the picture. Maybe it's grandchildren, or maybe there's, I know so many of us can't travel, but some of us are traveling. Maybe you have a trip plan. Maybe it's for 2021. Maybe you're looking forward to the holidays, however they turn out. So taking the time to do this practice meaning a daily habit, can make a big difference in navigating that sense of uncertainty and roller coaster of emotions that many of us are feeling right now, and I have to say aren't going to get any better before the end of the year. So let me just wrap this up here and say that as we think about financial triage, obviously what we're trying to do is to figure out what we can control and what we can't control. And as you think through, again, go back to either your action list, you may find that a number of the items that you put down fall into one of these 7 categories. Health, maybe what you choose to spend money on, maybe your core beliefs and values, how you're interacting with people or not, and certainly COVID has made that more difficult. How you worry, like, are you just really obsessing about things that are going on? And related to that, I think for many of us is, how are you spending your free time? We were talking with a client recently who said that after a long day at work, she was getting on her favorite channel and actually spinning a little bit because of just all of the negative news coming at her. So maybe making a different choice about your TV or social media, watching or viewing, maybe taking the time to read, get out, take a walk. So you have some choices here. And finally, the other choice that you do have is who you spend your time with. So that it's both interaction, is it positive, is it negative, and then who are you choosing to spend time with? And I know we've talked to a number of Omega clients who have said, you know what, coming out of this, I'm making different choices about who I'm spending time with. I'm actually honestly moving on from the folks that are sucking the life out of my soul and maybe are not positive, and moving on and connecting with people who are more positive. So let me stop there because that's a lot to take in. I'm curious if anybody's got any questions or observations. If you just have any observations and want to put them in the chat box down at the bottom, feel free to do that. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to drop those in as well. I'm going to just check in. Is anyone else noticing my voice being a little staticky? That does tend to be nature of Zoom, although I have a pretty good microphone here. So just curious if anybody else is noticing that, and I apologize if that's what you're experiencing at this point. So I think we don't have any questions for the moment. You may have some more, and I'm sorry about that if you're having a little choppiness. It is sometimes the nature of the beast of Zoom, so bear with me. Hopefully it'll get a little bit better. We can also pass on the slides if that's helpful at all going forward. Not sure I can do anything about the choppiness. We're going to cross our fingers that the connectivity improves a little bit for everybody as we move forward. I'm going to go back to the slides if I could at this point. Bear with me 1 second while I put that back up for us. All right, and I'm going to just move forward a little bit to where we are now. All right, let me just go ahead and share my screen at this point. Well, thanks, Jean-Marie. Who knows if it's my internet or your internet. So one of the things I'm going to talk a little bit here about, what may be swirling around for you. And I know for a lot of people, I was sort of hoping we had another week or two before we were really going to start to feel the impact of this. But what I'm hoping is, I'm asking the question, will the election result be your reality? Maybe, maybe not. And some of this is going to come down to how you approach it, how you frame it, maybe what action plans that you take, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Right now we're dealing with the pre-election turmoil and, the issues about fair voting and who's going to get to vote and what that's all going to look like in the polls. What are they looking like? I know there's a lot of focus on the presidential election. I'm going to encourage you, and I'll talk about this at the end when we get to the markets. What do you need to be paying attention to? You also need to be paying attention, especially for financial matters, to the congressional, Senate, and House elections, because those are probably going to have a bigger impact in some ways on all of us financially. And then I know, and by the way, this is not our country. I think this is Bolivia, by the way. I put a picture of post-election uncertainty. I know that some of you are worried about unrest, especially if it's not clear what the election result is going to be. And so that's something I know it's a reason to be anxious. I know some of you are planning on getting out of certainly the Washington, D.C. area or out of major metropolitan areas. That's certainly an action that you can take, maybe a wise one. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's definitely something that I know is a concern for many of us. So one of the things I want to say, and this slide is actually from my colleague Jared Jones's presentation a couple of weeks ago about the markets and politics. One thing that we continue to say is the market isn't the economy and the economy isn't the market. And I know many of you are dumbfounded by the straight move up practically since the end of March of at least the US stock market. Something we are talking about with many of our clients right now is that although we keep hearing headlines, the S&P and the Dow are near all-time highs, they've rallied a great deal through the third quarter, certainly the end of second quarter and third quarter. The reality is that the S&P 500 and the Dow took a huge nosedive. They recovered almost all, and in fact, with the S&P 500 have recovered a little bit. Basically, we're sort of back to even and a little ahead of where we were at the end of February before we took that hit. We are not majorly ahead in the stock market for this year. And the minute you open the hood and look under the hood a little bit, what you're going to find is that a lot of the performance that we have seen since the end of March has been driven by a handful of technology stocks, also some biotech stocks, around vaccine and treatments for COVID-19. It has not been an across-the-board rally of all stocks in this country. And when you dive a little bit deeper, what we find is that if you're in a lot of the dividend-paying stocks, energy stocks, they're all negative for the year. Smaller company stocks are negative significantly for the year. International and emerging markets like India, Brazil, Russia, China, those stocks are not doing great either. In fact, right now, overall, from an asset allocation standpoint, the bond market is leading the S&P 500. So you may not have realized that, and as you start to get your performance reports in the next couple of weeks, you're going to realize the returns are very modest for this year because it really hasn't been a great year. We've had a lot of recovery, but not a lot of growth. And then there's the economy. So there's been a lot of talk about layers and shapes of the markets and the economies. A lot of people, and certainly the president has talked a lot about this, that we've had a V-shaped recovery. That V-shaped recovery has come in the financial markets, primarily in the US market, not necessarily overseas. But what hasn't happened is that we have not had a V-shaped recovery in the economy. It's been at best maybe more U-shaped, which means it's a little longer recovery, but we have certainly seen a lot of jobs come back, but not all jobs have come back. There are definitely retail stores closing, businesses closing, airlines are suffering, as we know, because we've heard a lot about giving them some stimulus. The economy, I think the big question now, you may have heard this, we've had some questions from some of our clients. What's this K-shape? recovery. And what that basically means is that we have some people, the white collar professionals who've been able to work at home, are in certain fields that it didn't matter, you weren't manufacturing anything, you didn't necessarily have to be in close contact with anyone. Those jobs have recovered and in some cases flourished. Whereas for many people in the economy, especially in retail, in hospitality, even in healthcare, it's been a negative slide downwards, and those jobs have not come back. And the question is now becoming, are they ever coming back? Maybe at some point, most likely. We certainly recovered after the 2008-2009 Great Recession, but it was a long process to get there. And certainly there's some concern about inequality between race and which classes of folks are getting their jobs back versus which aren't. And so we're all starting to wonder, is it really a K economy recovery, and what are we going to do about this? So you need to separate those two. And I know it is dumbfounding, it's frustrating, especially depending on which political side you're on, but the two things are different from one another. So let's talk about financial planning. What should you be planning for at this point? There's lots of things that may already be on your concerns and fears list. Uncertainty, economic uncertainty. You may be concerned about losing your job. You may be concerned about a loved one losing their job. Political uncertainty. Are we going to know who won the election? How is that going to be handled? So there's a lot of uncertainty there. How do we actually plan for that? Well, that's on your list there of fears and concerns. Can I control this or can I not? Now, if it's your job, maybe you start getting your resume in order, you start networking with friends, you start looking on Indeed or other job boards and get out there and try to get ahead of it if you can. Maybe it's a good time to retool, gain some new skills, maybe gain some new education. So there are some things you might be able to do. Politically, not a whole lot to do except vote, get other people to vote. That's maybe where you can help at this point. Contribute to causes and campaigns that you believe in. Now, a softening economy is a big one. So are we going to have additional job losses? I know we just saw the most recent jobless numbers. We've got a little higher jobless claims than were expected, which means, and I think we're going to see those numbers grow over the next few weeks because we've had a number of businesses announce layoffs since the beginning of the month and the quarter. And I think that we're going to see more of those. So we're probably going to see additional job losses. If we have less people working, less people spending, we have a very consumer spending driven economy, that may lead us to soften up. We've been making improvement, but that may change a bit. Now, can you do anything about that? Not necessarily unless you're personally impacted. So that's something we're going to have to maybe monitor if nothing else. And Davis, let me know if we've got any questions before I go on. Okay, so potentially higher taxes. Now this is an important one. There's a lot of talk out there about, you know, what Biden is going to do with taxes. So let me be clear here that taxes are laws. We have to create laws to change the tax structure on an ongoing basis, as opposed to, you know, a little thing here and there. You know, even those $1,200 checks didn't just come out without having some law and legislation behind it. But this is a concern. So if we were to get a Democratic administration and a Democratic Congress, there is some expectation or certainly speculation that we are going to see higher income tax rates by a little bit. So the top rate might move up a little bit, 2 or 3%. Now, state and local taxes, that's a whole different story, and that's maybe a little bit more COVID and economic related. One of the big areas that I think is a planning opportunity, perhaps, though, is that we may see capital gains taxes dramatically increase. So the highest rate right now, I'm going to say it in simple terms, is 20% on long-term capital gains from investments, maybe selling your house, that kind of thing. There is talk. There's nothing in print, writing, or in law. We might see a Democratic Congress raise capital gains rates up ordinary income tax rates. So right now, ordinary income tax rates are go up to a higher range, whereas capital gains rates at the highest point are about 20%. We might see those rates be exactly the same. Now, honestly, this is going to take some time. Not everybody is going to be excited about this change. Not even all Democrats are going to be excited about this possibility. And so I don't think this is something that's going to happen overnight. However, it is possible. We've seen this before, where we might have some new tax legislation come in and they retroactive it to January 1st of 2021. It's possible. And we may have some changes in corporate tax rates. We may lose some other special tax benefits that were put in the last couple of years by the current administration. So that's where a lot of the uncertainty is. And there might be some planning that you need to do. And that's something I can tell you that as we're meeting with all of our clients this fall, we are thinking about that. We're thinking ahead for you. We're talking with your CPA, with your accountant to figure out, is there anything we might want to do this year just in case there's an increase in taxes next year? Funny enough, one of the things that you might decide to do is do even more charitable giving in the future versus this year, because you might get more bang for your buck in a higher income tax structure later on. But nobody knows. So to be clear, it's a possibility. Can we control it? Not really. Maybe can we manage it a little bit? Can we plan ahead? Are there actions we might take? Mostly for many of us, it might be monitoring, but we welcome your questions. Feel free to email us or talk with us at your upcoming meeting if you've got one coming up in the next couple of months. And then there's the last one, which I know is really unnerving for a lot of people, and that is unrest. So what happens if it's not clear who's won the presidential election? It's not clear if that person is going to allow a peaceful transition to the next president. As a result, people are unhappy and we have unrest in the streets. I know that's a concern for a number of you. The question becomes, what are you going to do about it? And will you really be impacted by it? So that's going back to that financial triage worksheet to say, is this something I can control or not? And am I really going to be impacted? If you live in a large metropolitan area, you might be a little bit more concerned about this. You know, if you have somewhere else to go, you might choose to move to that other, you know, maybe go see family and friends or make a different choice as far as where you're going to be at the beginning of November, shortly after the election. And if you're working with us at Omega, what do we need to do to help you plan for some possibilities? We recently had a very productive conversation with some longtime clients who are very worried about a lot of these issues. And we started to, and we're actually going to be talking with them next week, modeling out some scenarios of what if they moved here? What if they moved there? What would that look like for them in the short term? What's the long-term impact? Are there shifts we need to make in their portfolio? I'm going to talk in a minute about if you were going to consider relocating. What are some of the things that you need to talk about? And some of you may be thinking, are you kidding me? You're actually going to talk about this? Yes, I am, because I would always rather, and this is really our motto at Omega, we always rather plan for the worst and let you hope for the best. And if it doesn't turn out to be an issue, great. We've done a little scenario planning. You're ready for the next next uncertainty that might come along. And the last question is, are these short or long-term concerns? Because if it's a short-term concern, you know, it might be one of those monitor issues and there's not much we're going to take action on. Whereas if it's a longer-term, more systemic issue that you're concerned about, that may require some action. So let's talk about this for a minute. You're thinking, and in fact, I can say, you know, you might be thinking, I'm going to run off to Mexico. Well, in fact, one of our clients already did that. He got on his motorcycle and he's down in Mexico and he's going to be down there for the duration at this point. He retired a little bit early and he can do that. Not surprisingly, cost of living is a lot cheaper there. He's got a financial situation that supports that. So the first question we got to ask is, where can you even go? So if you haven't looked at this yet, and I'm sorry to say if you don't know this, we can't go a lot of places as Americans. If you're Jewish, Israel's a great place to consider. For all of us, the UK is a possibility, but you got to be willing to quarantine for 14 days, or I think you need to have a negative COVID test. There are some places in the Caribbean, but they're getting a little tighter on the testing and the quarantining. You can go to Mexico, but for many of us fans of Canada, that is not on the list right now. So thinking that you're going to run off to Canada, that's not one of our choices as Americans until we get a better handle on the COVID pandemic. So realistically thinking through, where would I go? Now, maybe you're not looking to relocate short-term or long-term internationally. It's just maybe you want to get out of the city. Okay, that's a different consideration here. I'm actually talking about perhaps a year. Maybe you're concerned about the result of the election. You're concerned about the policies and what may happen here in our country. And so you're talking about picking up, moving for the next year to 4 years somewhere else. So you've really got to think about, where can we go right now? We might not be able to go the place we want to go now. We may have to look somewhere else. And then you have to think about, if you're still working, can you work in another country? You'd have to get a work visa in many cases. Financially, what shape is that country in? What's the deal with their currency? By the way, what's the deal with their health and COVID situation? You need to think through all of those things. How would that work for you? And some of the things that we're gaming out a little bit is, okay, how would you access your financial resources? Do you need to set up an international bank account where you could move money back and forth? We just found out recently, we thought that, there might be some tricky things with our investment partner, SEI, but it looks like whether it's Schwab or SEI, we can make that work. We can wire money out internationally. So those are things we've actually started to look at. And then there's the tax implications. So depending on whether this is a short-term move, a long-term move, how long are you going to be out of the country? Just know that as a U.S. citizen, you're going to be taxed on your worldwide income, not just your U.S. income. And so this is when we might start to get a tax specialist involved and work through what needs to be done. What do we need to think about? Maybe you're thinking about selling your house. Is there going to be a capital gain in doing that? Or maybe you're going to Airbnb your property because you're going to be located somewhere else. There are tax implications to that we need to work through. And then finally, when we think about relocating, what am I giving up? And again, it depends on whether this is a short-term or a long-term move for you. But what am I giving up? What rights and benefits am I giving up? What is my access to health care? What about my family members? Can I go back and forth? So really thinking through the big picture. And if you're having a hard time doing that, that's exactly what we're here to do here at Omega. So one of the big questions that I get, actually before I move on, are there any other questions or comments from anyone before I try to tackle the investment piece of this? Davis, just let me know if you've got anything. Okay, so big question that we heard back in February and March. We're hearing again as we lead up to the election. Okay, what about my portfolio? Do I need to make a change before the election happens? Because I'm worried things are going to get really volatile. Depending on the result, the market's going to go down. And gee, maybe I should go to cash right now. My retirement accounts, my taxable accounts. Oh, and then what about gold? Maybe gold's the best place to be at this point. And I've been investing regularly. Maybe I should wait it out, stop putting money into the market before and see what happens and then start investing again. So my answer, not surprisingly for those of you who've worked with us for a while, is it depends. So one of the things we need to think about, especially when we're looking at selling and repositioning the portfolio, is that it's not one decision, it's two decisions. My colleague and our director of investments, Jared Jones, always says, okay, the easy one is when to sell. That's your amygdala, this thing back here that's real reactionary in your brain. Easy, boom. Let's when that's leading the way, when your amygdala is talking, it's time to sell. Sell, sell, sell. Let's get out. Let's sit on the sidelines. Let's let the dust settle, and then I'll get back in. this is where it gets tricky. And again, I'd urge you to take a look at Jared's webinar a couple of weeks ago. It's up on our website. And actually, Davis, if you want, maybe you can hunt it down and we can put that into the chat box as well, just to make it a little easier for people. But the bigger question is, how do you get back in? Because of course, the time you should get back in, if we follow the sell high, buy low, you've got to buy in at a point where it seems like you absolutely shouldn't buy in. And the problem is, and our friends at SEI Investments will tell you, if you miss it even by a couple of days, you miss the low by a month or 2 months or 3 months or 6 months, you may miss out on a lot of the recovery. And now guess what? You're buying back at where you were, or even higher. And that's exactly what we don't want to do. So this whole idea of should I sell, you have to think about when am I going to buy? And if you can't figure that out, and honestly, if you're the person who's thinking I should sell now, you're not going to be the person who's going to be able to strategically buy when you need to. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have strategies at Omega that help you weather this. Our whole goals-based approach to investing can help you weather the volatility. And let's remember, volatility is just the ups and downs. So sometimes it's negative volatility, sometimes it's positive volatility. What we need to be concerned about is a downturn. So that's what we need to think about a little bit. But that buying is the hard part, really. Now, Davis, do we have any questions here or any comments that I need to address?
Not at this point.
Great. So, there's a lot of different ways that we can tackle de-risking the portfolio a little bit. Maybe we just reduce the asset allocation a little bit. Maybe we put a little bit more in cash. I'm going to talk about some of the things that you might want to do sooner than later to prepare. So it might be a little bit of tweaking as opposed to wholesale selling. So what are some reasons when you should sell? And this doesn't mean sell out your entire portfolio. This means when might we need to sell something? Number one, and I know some of you are tired of us putting this into all of our email communications, our newsletter, but I'm going to say it again. If you need cash in the next 6 months, that's a reason for us to take a look at the portfolio and perhaps get that cash set up right now rather than guessing where the market's going to be 6 months from now, 7 months from now, even 3 months from now. Now that could be for college education costs. So some of us I certainly have students in college right now. We'll have another tuition payment coming up for most of us sometime in January. That's a good reason to maybe have that tuition and room and board payment already in cash or in a money market is what I really mean. Maybe you're living off your portfolio and you're going to need to access some more cash to live on. Maybe you've got a big expense coming up. You're renovating something, you're buying something. All of those reasons would be something for us to consider. Where do we pull it from? We want to help you figure out strategically which is the best account to pull it from. Where should we put it in the meantime? Number two, now we did not, because of the CARES Act, no one had to take required minimum distributions from their IRAs and retirement plans this year. Now remember, the magic age now, if you're just getting to this point, is 72, not 70 and a half anymore. So nobody had to take required minimum distributions this year. However, assuming that we get back on track with the economy, we all may face having to take those required minimum distributions next year. And if you're turning 72 next year, you need to be prepared for that. So what we would like to do is take a look at your IRA, your 401k, 403b accounts, and go ahead and take a guess at what we think that amount's going to be. Get that in cash now so that there's no need to second guess when should we sell so that we can make the distribution, especially if you need to live off of this money, or especially if you're going to actually give it to charity. Let's just go ahead and get that taken care of. Now, luckily, most of our clients still have the money we had put in cash for this year's required minimum distributions still in cash, but we definitely are going to be checking that for you. And if you're not one of our clients, that's something you should be looking at. Number three, if you think you're going to lose your job in the next, few months, 6 to 9 months, then we need to have a conversation about restructuring your portfolio and figuring out what your cash needs might be. So that goes back to number one. that is absolutely something that needs attention. And then number 4, honestly, if you can't sleep at night, that may be a reason, and I'll say to reposition, not sell out of your portfolio. But please talk to us first. We've had a couple clients sell first and tell us afterwards. As Jared likes to say, it's hard to unscramble the eggs after the fact. So talk with us. Let's strategize through it. We've done this with a couple of clients already this fall. All right, let's tweak this. Let's take the risk down here. Let's put a little more cash over there. But that keeps you invested for growth. All right, so when shouldn't you sell? There's plenty of reasons. If the reason that you want to sell is you're just plain fearful and scared, that's your amygdala talking. That's not the executive functioning part of your brain. Please call us. Let's walk through it. Let's talk through what the concerns are, what the fears are, what we can control, what we need to plan for. Number 2, if your financial plan is already a bit off track, and we've run planning numbers for you and it's not quite looking as good as we'd all like it to look, you need to stay invested. Now, if you've got cash needs coming up, if you're concerned about the markets, you're having, you're worrying about it, you're not sleeping at night, all right, let's talk through a strategy. But you really can't afford to be too conservative. And what we do know, again, I'm going to refer back to Jared's webinar a couple of weeks ago, is that we're going to have a lot of volatility, but in the end, if the markets keep moving up, you want to stay invested. Everyone's different. It is not a one-size-fits-all solution or answer, but we need to talk. And then third of all, if you've already got plenty of cash, or you've already got buckets of conservatively managed assets, maybe you've got a bond portfolio or one of our conservative strategies or defensive strategies, you don't need to sell. We've already got you covered. We're happy to walk you back through the strategy again to make sure it makes sense to you, but you most likely don't need to wholesale go and take everything to cash. And again, the tricky decision is not the first one, it's the second one. So let me stop there. We're about to wrap up. I want to just see if anybody's got any questions for us, maybe other scenarios I haven't mentioned, or a concern that you have. I'll just open it up and see if anybody's got anything. So let me know, Davis. And I do welcome, as always, you can always reach out, email us individually, because it may be personal circumstances that you want to check out with us so that we can take a look at everything for you. So with that, I will say, if we don't have any other questions, thank you for joining us. Please be sure to check out our website in the resources section. There's a couple things I would urge you to look at. Number 1, or great, if we've got some comments or questions, we'll handle those. You can take a look at Jared's webinar a couple of weeks ago and see, learn a little bit more about politics and markets. It's a very fascinating, I think, webinar. And then in addition, we keep putting up resources on our website, so stay tuned there. So Davis, do we have any questions or comments to share?
No questions.
Okay. Any comments to share as well, because I don't have that open right now that you need to share?
No.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you so much for your time today. I hope this was useful for some of you who were feeling a little nervous. It's been a rough couple of weeks. Please take a little time to go through the financial triage worksheet, give us a call or bring it to your upcoming meeting. Hang in there, take a deep breath, stay safe, get outdoors, and thanks for your time today.